going to mute, okay? Good evening, everyone. Welcome this evening to this production of the Institute for Pastoral Community Engagement, coming to you from this live stream event. We have a great panel, a program lined up for you this evening, and we hope and trust that all of our pastors who are watching this evening on Facebook and YouTube Live will be enriched and empowered, as well as our law enforcement community will be encouraged and experience the support that we pastors provide as we engage this conversation on this evening. We want to thank our panelists for joining us. They'll be duly introduced in just a moment. But I would like to say, on behalf of the Institute for Community Engagement, that we're looking forward to this amazing conversation because there's so much to learn and so much opportunity in terms of mutual support, both for law enforcement and the civilian community in all of the United States of America. Now, we are cognizant of the fact that there have been some bad things that have happened in the news over the past many years. And the media has helped us to get an inside view, so to speak, as well as social media concerning relevant issues, matters that do need to be addressed by all of us who are great Americans. And so we have come this evening not to debate, not to fuss and fight and quarrel, but to have a conversation among professionals who all care for the upliftment and the benefit of all of our communities. I'm Dr. Everton A. Ennis. I'm the president and CEO of the Institute for Pastoral Community Engagement, and I'd like this time to welcome and introduce to you our host for this evening, Dr. Joshua C. Nelson. I have great admiration for this preacher of righteousness. He's very engaged in his community there in Albany, Georgia, in the south of Atlanta. And I'm here to tell you that he's so passionate about the subject of community policing that he went and did a whole doctoral degree in this particular subject. And so I want to welcome and introduce to you at this time, Dr. Joshua C. Nelson, our host for this evening, and he will introduce the rest of our panel.
I appreciate that, Dr. Ennis. It is an honor and a privilege to be here on this platform today. As he stated, this has been a subject of mine or a thought of mine for a long time in terms of thinking about how the community and police can continue to be more engaged and be, built up with trust. And so I'm really excited about tonight when he offered this opportunity to me and wanted me to host it. I was excited because this will give us an opportunity, I believe, to really have a good, healthy conversation about some of these subjects that we often think about and talk about. And as pastors, figuring out how we can really support our community, especially when our community is hurting. And so we want to kind of jump right in. But, before we do that, I want to just kind of blanket this in another prayer, if we can, as we get into the subject tonight. Father in heaven, I just want to thank you again for the opportunity we have right now. We pray that you will just bless our conversation, God. And we look forward to what you're going to bring out tonight. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. I wanted to kind of share a little bit about my background. I grew up in California, and my earliest kind of memory of interacting with police officers was when I was young, and we had a birthday party. My mom invited Officer John, and there's a picture, this infamous picture of me sitting there in the officer car. Of course, being young, wanted to be a police officer, and then kind of learning about my aunt and uncle, who my uncle actually was a detective in the Compton Police Department. My aunt, she was a sheriff in over in Hawaiian Gardens in California. So having that kind of in my background, and then dealing with kind of the past 10 years, just kind of seeing the various viral videos. I don't know if it was Tamir Rice or if it was Philando Castile, but just the emotion that we all kind of had in seeing those things happen, and then also kind of wanting to kind of mitigate that and say, I know that this is not everyone. And how do I then reconcile that? I remember doing a study with the DOJ, with Eric Holder back then when he was there at the Department of Justice. And his determination at Ferguson was simply that there was a lack of trust between the community and the police department. So that was kind of became my quest to figure out how we can build more trust in our communities between police officers and the community. And specifically for my dissertation, it was dealing with young Black men. I think that I want to just kind of start with saying this to our panel. I feel like with everything, in any career, there are people who will be bad apples or bad actors in your career. I know for me, anytime I see someone who's a pastor who does something that's just not right or gets in trouble for something, then it's like the entire pastoral community is like looked at in a certain way. And so I kind of begin to see how that feels. And I think that in this conversation now, hopefully those who really are able to kind of see the difference between those who are doing good and those who are doing bad are moving to more looking at, with policing specifically, the systemic root of policing. But what is it? What does it look like in the positive sense, and how can we move forward together as a community? And so I think a lot of people tonight want to hear from our officers and our pastors, just really to be able to say, hey, we get it, and this is where we are, and this is what we're trying to do. And so tonight, I want us to really think about that and think about digging deeper into each other's why versus the what, and really uncovering how people think and how we feel about these various situations. And so as Dr. Ennis mentioned, I did my dissertation in this area. Me and Chief, I'll introduce to you in a moment here, Chief Persley and I, along with a number of other police departments here, or law enforcement departments here in Albany, Georgia, we did an intervention with young Black men. And we had police officers, young Black men together in a room for 2.5 weeks, and just dove into some questions and really tried to find a way through using this intervention that I created called Faith, Integrity, and Training, and trying to find a way to build trust. And so I think I want to just kind of springboard off of that, but introduce to you now the panel that we have for this evening. I'm really excited about them, and so we want to introduce to you our panel. We have Chief Gary Sparks from the city of Douglasville, Georgia, that police department there. We're happy to have him with us tonight. We have my Chief Michael Persley from the city of the great city of Albany, Georgia, police department. We also have Lieutenant Patricia over there in the city of Newnan, Georgia. And a good friend of mine, Officer David Fraser, who's out there in DeKalb County Police Department. We also have some clergy members with us today. We have Dr. Wellington, who is the English Ministries Coordinator up there in New York. And a good friend of mine, also Pastor Everette Samuel, who is Associate Pastor at Maranatha SDA Church in Brooklyn, New York. And of course, we've met Dr. Ennis, who is, of course, our great president and CEO of the Institute for Pastoral Community Engagement. And so we're glad to have everyone on the line today. And I think I want to just jump in right here. And again, y'all, just feel free to share, how you feeling right now, because we want to really hear from you. We want to really get this thing out and have a good conversation tonight. But really, what do you feel? And whoever wants to kick it off, but what do you feel as officers specifically are the major issues and challenges of today's policing environment? And I'm gonna kick it to Officer Fraser there. This first one, y'all gonna me trying to look at each other. Who's gonna start first? I'm gonna tell you who's starting. David Fraser, go ahead, man.
Okay. So just to make sure I heard you correctly, you said what do I think the major issues are between law enforcement and community? Was that the specific question?
You can answer that. That's a good question too. But yeah, just in a broad sense, the issues and challenges of today, just being a police officer today. What do you feel are some of the major challenges?
Okay, well, that's a very good question. I think that being a police officer is a unique challenge. I think in the sense that officers are asked to do a lot of things that they're not necessarily trained to do, and I think that can lead to officers, I guess, getting frustrated within the context of their work. I would say more specifically, sometimes just dealing with, I guess, in a sense, being a jack of all trades. When prior to being a police officer, I was a pastor, and I encountered sometimes similar issues in that my members had expectations from me within the realm of counseling, of which I am not trained. Expectations. You all have to excuse me. My children are getting ready for bed, but expectations within the context of of things that I wasn't necessarily adequately prepared for. And I think that today officers, often we get calls, and when we go on those calls, sometimes I tell a person, I wish that I could assist you, but what you need is a counselor. What you need is a social worker. What you need is potentially a chaplain, somebody who can help you in terms of community resources. And so I think that officers are asked to do things that are outside of the scope of what they may be trained for. And I think that in a sense can create a lot of challenges in terms of community expectations and in terms of what officers are expected to do, and then in terms of how they respond to those expectations.
That's interesting. Appreciate that perspective. And I think that's interesting too. If you all heard, he used to be a pastor. So he kind of can answer both of these questions, kind of shifting back and forth. But I want to open that question up to anyone else or another officer who wants to maybe answer. What do you feel as being the issues and challenges in today's policing?
So I will echo what Officer Fraser said, and he kind of summed it up. That the issue is we're trying to solve everything, and is all put at the footsteps of the police. And sometimes we bring it upon ourselves to where we say things such as, well, if a person's having a problem, whether it's a civil issue, criminal, or just maybe just a non-law enforcement issue, period, call the police. Whatever it is, call the police, because honestly, we're one of the few agencies that is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The challenge is that when so much has been put on the shoulders of law enforcement to carry that weight, then the challenge is we're not fully equipped, and at times we will go so far outside of the scope of our mission that we ultimately fail, or we have make a serious mistake somewhere down the line. Well, at that same time that we're wanting to we're to be everybody to everything, the other part is trust. I mean, and not just in recent events, but when you look back just through the history of law enforcement, the biggest challenge is trust in the community. And I was just at a community meeting prior to this, and the thing I told them is, I said that when I was in a narcotics agent back in the mid to late 90s, the late 90s, the challenge was during the war on drugs. Listen, if you had drugs on you, you went to jail. And I mean, we were sending people to prison for a long time. Well, when we go back and you look at the people who we sent out to prison, those people who didn't get, those people who were drug users and didn't necessarily get the treatment, we're dealing with those grandkids of those people. So because of the call for the community on the war on drugs, we went all in. Well, none of us would have thought about the consequences of that. So that's one of the biggest challenges, and that's just part of that trust that has hurt many of the communities. Now, I'm not saying that trust is just torn apart, but in some communities it is severely damaged. So, but even with that, we're still the ones who are expected to do just about any and everything, and whatever problem it is, you just call the police. And honestly, that is, we're not suited for that. But a way forward, more community involvement, more community outreach, not from us to them, but I'm saying other community partners. That's what will try to help stem the tide of what we're doing. And along the way, how can law enforcement build trust and legitimacy with their communities?
It's good. I appreciate that answer. I want to ask the same question to some of our community clergy. What would be your understanding? I mean, I guess it's kind of hard to answer if you're not an officer, but from your interaction, what would be your answer to say, what are some of the challenges that you see in policing today. And who am I going to call on? Well, whoever wants to go, but man, if you don't go, I'll call on somebody.
All right, I'll take a stab at it. Um, I think the challenge that exists today is that of trust, as the previous officer just said, um, community relations, um, the proliferation of the news that we see on social media has no doubt caused a level of distrust between police and community. And the police departments around our country are all filled with men and women who have taken an oath to protect and to serve the community. And for the most part, we know that they all try to give of their best. For the most part, we know that they sacrifice their time, their family to give of their best. And to those officers who are here on this call and this program this evening, as a clergy, as a member of the community, I'd also like to say thank you for your commitment, your dedication, your sacrifice. But I think also repairing that trust that is directly impacted by the social media element of what's happening. I think that's a big element that police and community um, have to work on. I know in New York, where I'm at, and the NYPD, they are trying to build that bridge between community and the police, and they have sectors. They have sector cars and people that cops that are assigned to specifically to help with building that bridge, especially in light of all that's happening. So I think the community has to extend its hand, and the police also has to be intentional about building that bridge.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's good. That's good. I appreciate that. You know, I definitely want to echo that. I mean, I think that we cannot take light the amount of pressure, the amount of responsibility, and the amount of bravery really it takes, you know, for an officer. And we really want to commend all the officers on the call now. We, you know, I want to really get kind of a little deeper, quick. We're gonna go in right now, y'all. I want to really kind of get that heart to heart, you know, and really kind of talk about um, some of the current issues that we're facing today. As you know, we not none of us are under a rock. We understand um, the power of social media today, the power of the media today, and what we've seen over the past summer, even and protests throughout the country. Um, we want to know how does this make you feel as officers? What is it even like as an officer serving in today's climate with all that's been going on?
Well, for me, I've been on patrol for 31 years, and it's hard to see people that look at you now after all that's gone on, and they want to believe you and they want to have faith in you and trust you, but in their back of their mind, they're wondering, is she one of those? And that's the sad part. Our agency is big on being open and honest and being transparent. And luckily, we have an awesome community. We have good leaders. We have good political people, and they just want to keep our city safe.
Yeah, yeah, that's important. Yeah. So there is that kind of I don't want to say pressure, but there is that kind of sadness you kind of feel, and that
Yeah.
some people are looking at you a little bit differently because of all that's going on. Okay, and that's real. That's real. Anybody else want to share?
I think mental, and I think that it for me personally, it causes me to reflect on why I actually do the job. Uh, I I I have a theory that there's a big push now for officer accountability, and if I'm actually being honest, it actually doesn't bother me that people are pushing us to be accountable as officers, and only because I'm not a fool. inversely from the lieutenant who stated that she has been policing for 31 years, I've only been policing for 4 years. And coming up, so I essentially started my law enforcement career to a degree in this climate. And I can say that what it does for me is that, one, it calls for me to have reverence for my job. I think that there are officers, and I won't say any officer in particular, but there are officers who may not understand the magnitude of the power that we have. I went on one call, and it was a traffic stop, and a man had a suspended driver's license, and that's an arrestable offense in Georgia. You can be arrested and taken to jail for it. And as he sat there and he explained to me, he was like, "Listen, officer, if I go to jail right now, I am guaranteed to lose my job." And the thing is, as I sat there and I weighed his situation in the back of my mind on the side of the road, I realized that something that could really take me 30 minutes could change the entire course of his life. And when you realize that level of power, I'm just going to use that word, when you realize that level of power that you have, I think that you shouldn't have an issue with accountability. I do believe that. I don't think that you should have an issue with having to have to really take your time and process what you're doing, not rush through your decisions because of the magnitude they can have on other people. And so for me, what I think is that in this climate, it has caused me to be more patient and more practical, and really kind of be meticulous and methodical in how I move through the enforcement of my duties. And I think that if it's doing that for officers, I think that it may be a little uncomfortable at times, but I think that that's a good thing. I do believe that.
So that's a different perspective and a balanced perspective, it seems. The necessary for accountability. I guess in a sense, if I'm thinking about my situation as a pastor, it does kind of make you fly straight. We see what can happen to other pastors and different things that may be engaged in. But what maybe some others, what are some things, what are some feelings that you have? Maybe not just the officers now, let's open up to everyone. Just kind of looking at what's happening, how it makes you feel, and how your community may be responding to what's going on, and their perception and what you've been hearing on how they view police officers.
I'll take that. I like the fact that Officer Fraser talked about the power. And as I was actually thinking about this earlier, I thought about the power that police officers had in terms of they have that gun and that badge. And one of the things that as you notice with the rise of everything, you see that you yourself feel powerless, and you see the anxiety and the rise in the tension as there's expectation, and you as a human being, you want to be treated with some level of dignity and respect. And while you want to trust, at the same time you realize that anyone can be a victim of police brutality, and you don't want to walk around paranoid, but at the same time that it's just a matter of some things happening in a second. And because people are not aware of that power, then it can be an abuse of power. At the same time, I'm coming from a frame of reference where my sister was a police officer. So I heard of the stories of the frustration that comes with it. But now, as I looked with everything that's going on, I'm just hoping that what needs to happen is that we need to teach our young people, teach people how to respond to the anxiety that we get when we are faced with certain situation, how to respond, because the response make a difference. At the same time, we need to deal with some of the stereotypes in the worldview and how we can change the worldview, how we can work together to change the expectation, change the worldview, so that we can have a better working relationship and start building some trust.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, there really is that real fear, right? There's fear that we hear from our members, from community members that we engage or deal with, the young boys that we mentor. There's that fear, that powerless feeling of, I could be a victim. That's kind of often what's said. How then can we infect that change? And what can we do as being pastors on the ground, in our communities. What can we do? What kind of support can we give to our police departments? And I think that I want to kind of talk about community policing in a second here, but I want to kind of answer that question first. What are some things that we can do to support in this issue of us feeling powerless in a sense, but now building the trust between, so there's not that fear engaged? Oh, you're muted, Doc.
Yes, thank you for that. When I came to my current district back in 2014, I brought with me the idea of the law enforcement and first responders appreciation day. So right now, every year in the month of February, we call our law enforcement community together, and the whole service is dedicated to them and their families. And so I preach, of course, a word that's encouraging, but also a word that's challenging. And Chief Sparks is very familiar with what we do here in Douglasville. Um, it's a two-sided thing. I'm charging and I'm encouraging our officers in terms of their commitment and their sworn duty to serve and to protect. And at the same time, I'm charging the people to recognize the task, the burden that is laid upon those who are called and who are sworn to serve and to protect. I remember the first year that we did this back in January of 2015. We used to have it in January then to start the year off. And at the end of the service, we invited our children to come up and to shake the officers' hands, and nobody moved. Not one child moved. I mean, they were frozen in place, and we had to coax them. It's okay. And the officers made some, friendly gestures and whatnot toward them. And then one by one, they started to warm up. So there is, as Pastor Everett mentioned before, there's a stereotype out there. And Pastor Josh, you mentioned it before as well. It's almost like we're falling into this trap where we say police officers, or we say white people, or we say black people. And those are generalizations, failing to recognize that generations don't solve problems. They make problems bigger and harder to solve, because now we've lumped everybody into the same basket, so to speak. And it's the same thing on the other side. We want to see that our police officers are trained and equipped and are sensitized to recognize every black person or every person in the minority community is not a thug, is not a suspect. And so it's a both-sided thing. And the word trust was used earlier. It goes back to trust. A lot of trust has been damaged or even destroyed. And so what we're trying to do this evening, I think, is to try to find a way through this dialogue with law enforcement and the clergy. And of course, the clergy represents the wider community, because we deal with that many people on a daily basis in the collective. Officers deal with the community sometimes one-on-one, but in some cases in a collective, and they also represent the community. One of my philosophies, my perspective is that when we're thinking about law enforcement officers, we sometimes forget that they also are part of the community. They go to the same grocery stores, they go to the same barber, well, those who go to the barber, and they go to the same hairdresser, their kids go to the same school. And so we are one. I wish my chief, Chief Sparks, he's having some technical issues, but here in Douglasville, I could tell you that man he is passionate about one community. That's the slogan here in Douglasville. And so he's big on community policing. Here he comes, Chief, my chief. And so, and that's the kind of language you will hear permeate Douglasville and the city and Douglas County. And so I'm going to let Chief Sparks say something, because he hasn't said anything yet. And Chief, say something. Let these people hear what we do here in Douglasville.
Thank you all for putting this together. But I go back to what I agree with everything some of the officers had said earlier in that first question It boils down to leadership from the top down. What the chief and the deputy chief, what the command staff, uh, who are they hiring? Are we hiring men and women that a servant has a servant heart? Are we looking for those type men and women, and are we holding them accountable? The power. Yes, officers have power, but also the people have power in those situations as well. So, some of the things that we do at Douglas feel like I'm here tonight. We have a youth against violence program where we empower the young people. And we've been running this program for about 13 years now, where we have the young men and women who have a little scrape with the police and maybe have a misdemeanor crime and whatever. We bring them here and we teach them life skills, uh, uh, conflict resolution, decision choices. We teach them how to deal with the police, how to deal with a traffic stop, what's probable cause, what is a reasonable suspicion, what are the Fourth Amendment rights. So we teach our people to understand what their rights over there on the street. One of the main things we make sure that our men and women that they work in a zone for a period of time, so they get to know the community. A lot of people may not, depends on manpower and officers may go from one zone to another zone and all this kind of thing. Well, they don't get to know the community. We make sure our officers work a community for 3 months or more, so they'll know the people. Our philosophy is if our people and if the officers know the citizens, they would be less likely to hurt the citizens because they know them. And the same is true on the flip side, that the citizens, if they know the police officer, they may be less likely to hurt the police. So we can have dialogue. We have several meetings with the community throughout the year. So I think the main thing with officers I see is it's training. Yeah, we wear a lot of hats. But if the officer is proper trained, he know what hat to put on. He'll know that this hat I can't use. Let me find you all some another avenue, some help. This is not my position to help someone that's mentally disturbed. But I tell you what, I know how to deal with this situation and not hurt that person. And maybe back off and try to get some more help there. And so it's just, I think it goes back to training. Make sure you're getting the right people to fit the philosophy of the department. What is the police department's philosophy? Are they teaching that to the citizens? See, me as chief, I have to train the citizens as well as train our men. So when it comes down to the end, our police officers know that don't go out there treating our citizens wrong. You do unto others as you will have to be done to your family. And by doing that, then we can have procedural justice. Then we can have citizens where they're not afraid of the police. And then we can start, what we want is the citizens to police themselves. We want the citizens that what we do, we get out and walk the community. And we empower the citizens. Okay, well, you don't want drugs on the street, take back your community. So if you see drug dealers over there on your street, you need to call the police or step to them and tell them to get out of your area. For my kids can ride the bicycles. We just believe in the old time police and going back to getting out the car, going to meet the people that you serve. I think a lot of time police may have that mentality, that you talked about power. Yeah, they got all the power, but they ain't got the. Me myself, I tell my, you don't have the power. The power's in the people. They pay your salary, but when you boil it all out of the water, it's about how the chief and the administration, what are they doing to hold their people accountable? Who are they hiring? and how are they and having their men to get out into the community. So I know that's a whole lot.
No, that's good. That's
Yeah.
good. I mean, you really laid out a lot there, man, in terms of the research and study. You know, that's a lot of the solutions that are given in terms of how to solve some of these issues, man. So I love it. I love it. I love it. You know, and I think that, and that's kind of the conversation now in terms of community policing. And I'm a geek out real quick, y'all. You know, I'm a geek out real quick because there's these three levels of policing that I found in my research. There's the what they call the traditional policing. There's the community policing, but then there's a third level that kind of centers around restorative justice. If you all know about restorative justice and really kind of the even African roots that are centered in restorative justice with Ubuntu and the South African connections and stuff. But there's this level that goes beyond traditional, beyond community policing, but it goes to victim-centered policing, where the idea is to reduce the harm caused to victims and the community and help and really to help the offender self-regulate future behavior. That's the ultimate goal. And I don't know, you know, how far we are in various cities, but there's a level of this community policing that we want to go to, where we actually are seeing a community. You kind of talked about this, Chief. You know, seeing a community that is policing themselves, community that is centered on really revitalizing and restoring, if you will, the offender and really repairing the damage that was done to the community and the victim. But talk to me a little bit more about some of the things that pastors can do to support these kind of efforts in your community. And then we're going to move on to our next question from there. But I want to hit that on hard. What are some things pastors can do to really support these efforts of community policing?
Okay, I can share some practical. Pastors, I could talk about some of the practical things that we are doing right now. We are part of the 67 clergy council, the God Squad, and we work in community. We have a great relationship with the precinct. And I'll just give you an example. Like last night, I had one of my young men got into some trouble, and the first thing I thought about, like, oh my gosh, a record. I made a phone call. When I called the house, the police officer was there. I asked who was there. I knew the police, and I said, put him on the phone. I got on the phone. I spoke. I said, listen, this is not a bad kid. I've already made some arrangement. What can you do? You know, and he basically said, okay, we'll keep him here. We'll take care of him. Don't worry about it. By morning, they made, you know, the mom called me because we were getting ready to, you know, go to the courthouse. The mom called and said, oh, the DA called me. They said, don't worry, we don't have to come now. And they worked something out right there. But again, it comes from a relationship. Again, another time I was here and I was sharing with Dr. Ennis yesterday, where there was a situation outside right downstairs by me, and I knew that the police was going to come. I knew there was going to be a problem. Here it was like after 1, I'm saying, do I go outside? But that's something that we do as clergy. Someone gets shot, and so we go to the scene and we work as a liaison with the committee and the police. And I said, you know what, I have to go downstairs. As soon as I went downstairs, like 4 police cars just rushed in, someone called. And I was like, oh my gosh, none of these guys had a mask. I saw the situation. It was young black men. I went to the police. I told them, I said, stay back. Don't say anything. Don't say a word. Just stand still. I went to the police car and I said, listen, I'm part of the 67 clergy. I heard the noise. I'm working with these guys. Can you please just let me handle it? They say, are you sure? I said, yes, I am sure. They said, listen, if you have to come back, you know what's going to happen. I said, don't worry about it. They left. I was able to say, I said, guys, I just put my name out there. I just said that everything is going to be okay. The situation died down. I said that, you said that to say we have to build relationship before the situation escalates. So that way there's already a trust. And I could talk about numerous stories, but we have that relationship. So my advice to pastors is that build the relationship. And that is how, when the community, those young men, as they see that happen, the next day, one of them said to me, you work with the precinct? And I was able to explain to them like what we do. So when they see there's a good working relationship, at least it begins for them to even feel comfortable that they're not that bad after all.
Yeah, that's powerful. That's powerful. And I want to fly past that. I mean, because that was really amazing what you were able to do with that, with building that relationship. Talk a little more about the group that you're a part of there in Brooklyn, right?
Yes. Pastor Wellington, do you want to talk about that? Go ahead.
No, you can take it away. You do a great job. You do a great job.
Right.
I'll tell Pastor Monrose that you're doing an excellent job.
Okay, so that's part of what we do. Like we have, like there's pastors from different churches, and we work with the precinct. We have like. But the main goal is to reduce gun violence. And so we work with the police when something is going on. We are there. If someone gets shot, we would be there on site. We go, we try to actually work with the family. If someone gets shot, we would work with the family to help them plan the funerals. And there's actually what they call a ceasefire, where they go in and they try to work with the gang leaders and just try to say, listen, let's work together. We're here. We don't want you in jail. We just want you to be safe. That has been so successful. We also have in the summer, we have what we call the corner, where we go every Friday night, Saturday, we actually occupy the corner. We go in the community and pray where the people can actually see that you are there praying for the community. We are there right now with COVID. We work together, giving out masks. We are out there on the street. Everyone knows us, the God Squad. They respect us. They know if something happened, they would actually call. We had an incident like last summer that one of the gang leaders got shot. And we were able to just work with the precinct in that community. And when they thought that there was going to be a blood war, there was none. Why? Because we were there working together. Again, as a community, where there's an example like the Saturday night when we had so much police that just came in with the van, and I realized that the tension was rising. I was able to go and say, listen, there's so much police cars. Can you please just get some out, because you can see the tension is rising. And they listened to us, because why? They know that we were there working together. So these are some of the things that can be done. We have a website you can go on. There's training that we do. And I'm sure that they'll be willing to actually just come out and help with the training so that other areas could actually implement what we do, because we have a great working relationship with the clergy, with the community.
May I add to that?
Go ahead, Doc. Yeah.
Yeah, excellent, Pastor Samuel. But I want to also just add about the ministry of presence, because pastor, chaplain, community relations, you have to have this kind of a balance, advocate for the community, but also kind of helping to represent the police to the community. And you have to have that significant ministry of presence where it's beyond what happens on the pulpit on a weekend, whether it be a Saturday experience for us as Seventh-day Adventists or another day for another worship community, where we are actually in the community and engaged from the community perspective, and also connected with the police. So we actually go into the precincts, and at the roll call time, we spend time hanging out, offering donuts, praying, interacting with the police. And there's one significant thing that I think that is happening as a result of all the news cycle that we see happening. That's actually not a good thing. And that clergy, what can clergy do? I think clergy can help to change the narrative. And that is, if you're going to change something, you've got to be a part of it. So I actually go out and encourage our young men, especially from our community, to sign up for the police force. You can't change it from outside. You got to be inside, and you're robbing yourself of I know the chiefs are here. They may not want to answer or say anything on this point, but you're robbing yourself of a lucrative career path. You know, police officers do fairly well financially, but beyond that, they also provide a service. If your heart is in service, if your heart is there to give to the community, then consider the role of a police officer and help to change the narrative from inside inside and make that a difference. So that's something I just wanted to add to that.
I just want to add one more thing. One thing, if as pastors, we have to ensure that we are neutral, because we can't let the community feel that we are siding with the police officers. They have to see that we are neutral, and so that they can trust us. Who are you for? No. We are nobody's side. We are the Lord's side, and that is so important. So that we are neutral and stay, not just go for the power, but to them to see that we represent you, and for the police to be comfortable. So it's really important to have a neutral environment.
Last point, and then I'll shut up. I promise. 67 God Squad. It was all over the news, made CNN and everything like that, all over the news, where there's somebody who was shot by the police, was on the news and had a what appeared to be a fake weapon, and was shot multiple times. The entire Brooklyn area, around the same church where Pastor Samuel was at, we were together at the time, descended on. It was going to be riots, it was going to be protests, it was going to be all of that. The police chief called us in, all the clergy. This is now based on relationships, and says, listen, XYZ, look at this, look at this, look at this. And of course, I'm deterring things out for obvious purposes, okay? And then as a result of that conversation, we were able to go back to in the churches and in our networks, not just Adventist folk now, but all the clergy within the community, to be able to diffuse and tell everybody, go home, stay off the streets, because people were trying to come from outside to fuel a protest against the police. And we said, no, we don't want that in the city, because we recognize that this thing was a little bit more delicate than what you saw on the public media. And so as a result of that, we have to be fair in our assessments. We have to be neutral, as Pastor Samuel says, because the police must feel confident in our ability to rightly divide the evidence that is before us, and represent what is right for the community and for helping to build peace for the community.
Good. So,
Can you
well, this is good, man. And we're gonna try to wrap this up a little bit, but we want to kind of hit a couple more things before we close up. Did we spotlighted Chief Sparks? You want to say something, Chief?
Yeah, you were talking about the pastors in the community. When I first met Dr. Enos, he came to my office. He came to my office and spoke to me and let me know that he was here, and what his congregation was there to do, and to help the law enforcement. But on a grander scale, what we as law enforcement executives must do is what I do with the clergy is I have town hall meetings where we go over our policies, our use of force policies, our arrest procedures. We go over all of that because we know on Sunday or Saturdays, whenever the church is open, you have the community in your buildings. So you need to know our policies and procedures. And then on the other end, we have a town hall meeting for the communities. So they can come in and understand, what about what's going to happen if someone gets shot? How is the police department in Douglasville going to handle that? What's the procedure? So now it's on a level playing field. They know what we're going to do. So it's very important that the clergy is a part of law enforcement, and we all working in hand. We have a situation go bad. The first thing I'm doing is calling in the clergy, say, y'all look at these videos, because I'm going to put them out there for everybody to see, because we're transparent. So those are some of the things that we got to get back to in order to bring oneness back to the community. Our motto here at Douglasville is "We are one." Took that from Frank and Beverly. But we are one with the community. We don't believe in no thin blue line. We believe in justice and integrity and peace. So it takes all of us, the clergy, the business people, the politicians, everybody working together to make the community safe. And the more that we, law enforcement, get out that car and go and start going to shake hands and get to know the people, and the people get to know us, then we can destroy that thing about, okay, driving fast and shooting guns. No, that's not what police do. 98% of what police do is serve. Now you every now and then you get to drive fast, but our job, if you're not a servant, then the police department don't need to be hiring people. I commend that young officer that's been working for 4 years. See, he came to work when all the mess was going on with the police department. And like the last pastor said, if you're going to change something, get involved in it. I got 10 jobs. I got 10 jobs waiting on 10 men or 10 women to come in here and go to work. So when I go out now, we just had a big thing with all the police departments and talking about the justice and accountability. Police officers for justice and accountability. Had it right here in front of the police department. Because you got to let the people know what you stand for. We don't stand for no beating now, but I ain't standing for my people to get beaten too now. But it got to be, the more we build these relationships, hopefully we'll stop seeing these bad situations that some of these officers are doing. And then more of them need to go to jail when they do stuff like that. They need to be held accountable. At the bottom line, and be held accountable, because what happened to people people start saying they look at all police officers as the same. Yeah. No, we're not. Yeah. I'm not like that guy that put a knee on my man's neck. I'm not like, that's not me. And guess what? As a leader, I'm not gonna have those people on my police force. Because, and then I'm gonna shut up.
Oh, did we lose him? I think we may have lost him.
Yes, he's been having some technical issues. He just dropped off, but he'll be back. Go ahead. It seems like we need to talk about this thing, Pastor Josh, that broke out this past summer here. Something that you and I share a burden for. As Chief was saying just now about this idea of putting everybody in the box. Now, because justifiable outrage early this summer, especially with reference to George Floyd, who he was referring to just now. Then came this slogan, this unfortunate slogan about defund the police. Now, let me be clear. I absolutely disagree with the idea of defund the police. I've had people try to explain to me, what it really mean is, well, hold up just a minute. If you're gonna have to explain it to me, you're using the wrong word. You're using the wrong word. Say what we mean. Don't say something and then tell me that it means something different from what I see in my dictionary. Because in my dictionary, defund means to take away funding from. It means to subtract. It means to deny. I don't want the police to be defunded. Absolutely not. I would not be safe if the police were defunded. Nobody in America would be safe if the police were defunded. So if the idea is we need some reforms and changes, we need to do things as Pastor as the Fraser, Pastor Fraser, Officer Fraser said. There's some things, and he recognized early in his career, just like when he was in pastoring, there's some things he wasn't trained for. Then I'm saying, well, if we want to relocate from the public purse to make sure we add some things to what the police department. But the idea of defunding the police, the messaging is wrong. It's just wrong. I don't think it was properly thought through. And I think that we want to encourage people as clergy to pull back from that because it sends the wrong message. If I'm a police officer, it sounds like you're trying to tell me I must go fight crime, but we're not going to give you the equipment that you need to fight with. That's how I receive that. And I'm not even police. I'm a pastor, but I ain't going out there to go fight crime. You're going to fund me fighting crime. And so the messaging is important. And I think this is where, as pastors, we can make a great contribution. Have these conversations in our church. Now, Chief Sparks, I was bragging on him when he came back on. I'm telling you, he said, I could have told you he was going to say because I go to all his meetings. And so it is a part of the mindsets of our community here in Douglasville. And I appreciate what he said because it starts with leadership. It starts with leadership. And that's a critical part of this equation.
Can I jump in on that? Can I jump?
Go ahead, Pastor. I wanted to.
As a communicator, as a media professional, as a chaplain, as a pastor, and as one who works with the police community, let's just be fair, honest on this whole thing. Bad slogan, bad language, and it helped to fuel some of the misunderstanding that has occurred. If you, and I say those things before in support of what Dr. Ennis said, if from a communicator standpoint you have to, after you create a slogan, go ahead and explain it for it to make sense, then you've really not communicated effectively in the first place. I think the significant statement that has been made has been by Officer Fraser when he said that the call is around accountability. And there's nothing really wrong with accountability. And so, if your heart is in service, if you are here to serve the community, then there would be no real issue with having a level of accountability of what we do. Those are my 2 cents.
Okay. Here's the thing, and I hear you about like the having to explain the defund the police. Officer Fraser said something that's so important. He said, "Listen, we get calls that we are not trained for." And if you notice, people call the police for everything. They're out there 24/7. So if your dog is stuck in the window, you're gonna call the police. If for everything, you're gonna call the police. And sometimes they don't have the training. When I hear this defund the police, I'm saying, okay, reallocate some of that funds. So that way they are not the first person. They should not be the first responders for everything. If someone has a mental health issue, a mental health professional should be there in the forefront, not necessarily a police officer in the forefront. Yes, you want the police officer there because anything could happen. You want order. However, they're there as a support, just like how when in some situation you have the fire department, you have the EMT, we need to have funds available so that we can have more professionals standing in the forefront instead of the police officers. Where is that funds coming from? Let's say we don't have the money. So people are saying, hey, maybe there are too much funds going into the policing fund, and there's not enough funds that's allocated for the other professionals. So in my mind, that's what I'm thinking. And if we have to come up with another word that we don't have to explain, we need to. But there has to be something. We can't say, okay, keep them accountable, but what are we doing to provide for the police officers the training that they need and the help that they need? We can't expect to put them in certain position. They're given a badge and a gun. They are trained to kill. It is what it is. Whether or not we want to admit it or not, they're trained to take you down. You see danger, so it's an automatic response. What are we going to do to actually fix that problem, because that problem needs fixing.
I want to
Now,
jump in so bad, man.
I think we can all agree. I think
Let
we
me
can all agree
let me
about
get Pastor
accountability.
Samuel here, if I could. I wanted to bring in some others here to respond to that. I think that we're getting to some good stuff. And I really think that we have developed a great framework here for a number of pieces that can be put in place and implemented very easily in your community. I want to hit on what we just said though, and I think Chief Persley, were you trying to say something about that? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, here's the thing. First of all, you have to change the mindset. Don't call the police. But when you make that decision that we're not going to send police, you immediately need to have something in place. Here in the state of Georgia, about 3-4 years ago, they shut down the mental health hospitals. They severely cut funding for behavioral health, and they put it back on the communities. So now all of these people who were getting state assistance at these mental health hospitals, they're released back into the community, where the communities were not prepared for it. Because they still don't have the capacity. As a matter of fact, in funding last year for the state of Georgia, they cut funding for mental health treatment. We're not even talking about substance abuse treatment, which is, it's I'm not going to say it's non-existent, but it's not enough. Well, when I hear it, and ma'am, I understand what you're saying, that it's not like we have a pot of money. In my budget, the majority of my budget goes toward personnel expenses. I'm paying for healthcare, I'm paying salaries, the benefits, those things. A very small percentage of my budget goes toward operating expenses. So when you're talking about taking money from us, the majority of money you're taking away is from those officers, those men and women who are out there every day. That's where we're pulling. Okay, you take money from my operating expenses. I don't get new cars. I don't have the adequate equipment. I'm not able to maintain the equipment. So when we talk about does there need to be reform in the criminal justice system as a whole? Yes. But when you jump on the bandwagon, and I call it a bandwagon, of defund the police, I've yet to see what are they talking about? What does it look like? Because to me, if you reduce the capabilities of your police department, they won't be out patrolling. They will sit in a station and they will be dispatched. So when the person needs to call, they need the police, and they complain about our response times now, you'll really be complaining about it. I'm all for it. Don't send us the mental health calls. Send the professionals. That's fine. If your child is acting up and they don't want to go to school, don't call us. Call the school system. You work that out yourselves. If a crime has occurred, then yes, we'll respond. But if it's not a crime, and you're right, you made a good example about somebody's dog being stuck, don't call us. But we know that's not going to happen. They're going to call us for everything. We do need the better training, but we need that accountability. These incidents that have happened over this summer, and not just this summer, we can take this all the way back to right before I started with Rodney King, and every incident that has happened since. When you see a trend and you see what turns bad situations, that's where you start to address it. And when you want to talk about transparency and you want to talk about accountability, start looking into that department, the culture of that department. Start looking into the dynamics of that community to see how they interact, because we see a situation, and when we see the situation, we just take it for face value when there's a whole story behind it. Now, there have been some situations that flat out, listen, that was criminal on behalf of the officer, and that officer needs to be punished. But as a whole across, if when you take a stance to say you're going to cut something, if you cut it, you better have something right in place immediately that will meet the need, because the average citizen is still going to call us for any and everything. And when they don't hear that we're not coming, then they're coming for somebody to say, well, who are you sending in place of it? And if the answer is we don't have anybody, you can potentially have chaos on your hands. But do I believe we need to act right? Yes. Do we need to hold accountable? Yes. And those who don't need to be here, get them gone. Yes.
It's good stuff, y'all. That's my chief, y'all. That's my chief. That's good stuff. But listen, I think that this is a valuable conversation as we are really engaging, it sounds like, in that conversation of reimagining, not necessarily policing, I want to say, but just how we are safe or policed in a sense, because we've talked on Chief Spark talked about how we need to police ourselves and have communities who are holding each other accountable as well. We talked about just being proactive, and actually being in connection with officers and with our community, and being able to have what you have over there in New York with the God Squad. And we've also talked about just with this whole idea what Pastor Everett kind of talked about, which is this idea of a team of responders. How does that look? I don't know. Our time is really gone here. I want to give Lieutenant Pat an opportunity to kind of jump in here, maybe on this last thing. Has there been any, or maybe, just kind of thinking through, what does it look like to reimagine policing? And that may mean you say, hey, we need more help here or there. But when we hear that phrase, reimagining policing, what does that say to you, and what does that look like? And like I said, I'm going to let Lieutenant Pat kind of start here for us as we close out. Oh, you're muted. You're muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay. 31 years ago, policing was totally different than it is today. As the times change, you got to be willing to take the changes and make the best of them. You have to change with the times. And I know one of the things, if I have new officers to come to my shift, first thing I tell them, as long as you can go at home at night and you do not tarnish that badge and you can get a good night's sleep, you did the right thing. Our higher ups are very proactive with us, as far as we're very active in the communities. We have a community resource officers. We do guitars, not guns. We have an Explorer program. We have citizens academies, and we're always going out talking to people, because to us, they are our lifeline, because they're the ones that's going to help us. We can get the community involved in our business, then they will help us out as far as if we need witnesses or something like that, they'll call us. So you've got to have that connection with the community. And luckily, our department in Noonan is just awesome with the community, with the churches. And it's just a great place to work.
Some valuable information that we've received here, and we are at the end of our discussion. Honestly, there's a lot more we could go into, and more questions that I have, but I hope that this has really sparked some of the conversations and begin to cause you to engage your departments, your police officers, in a different way, more intentional way as pastors, and vice versa. That as we think about law enforcement, really seeing pastors as an asset and an aid to the entire hope for community trust to be built across the nation. So, Pastor, that's kind of where I'm kind of at right now in terms of closing. I don't know if there's any closing words you want to have or share as we kind of wrap this thing up.
Yes, indeed. Thank you so very much, Pastor Josh. Very good job. Very good job hosting our program this evening. And thank you so very much to all for your time. To Lieutenant Ayers from the Noonan Police Department. She, by the way, everybody, is the first female officer ever promoted to the rank of lieutenant in the Noonan Police Department. Yes. And so she was at the church last year, and we had a great time. Very good for you to stop by. We were able to give you some tributes there, and to Chief Persley and to Chief Sparks from the Douglasville PD, and to Officer, our former colleague, Joshua, David Fraser. And so he knows both sides of this conversation. And so thank you to our pastoral colleagues, Pastor Dr. Rohann Wellington, Pastor Everette Samuel, and of course to you, Josh. And thank you so much, everybody. We'd like our viewers to know that we have a great website with tons of information. Just check out the PCEinstitute.com. That's the PCEinstitute.com. And also, please be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Help us to grow our online community so that we can be easier found on social media. Thank you for watching. Thank you for everybody for being here this evening. God bless you all, and may our communities experience enriching peace. God bless.
Thank you.